Okay, hi everybody in the digital paradise. Prepare for an informative adventure with an unprecedented style. Welcome in ClearTalks, the podcast hosted by ClearMedia, where I, Nerd in Chief, surrounded with two guests, will be guiding you through the complicated maze of technology, specifically today on the topic of security, with one purpose. It is to bridge the gap between technology and human beings. And we will provide you with as much as useful information as possible to make that journey for you the most attractive one you've ever lived. Now, I have two people in the studio here, two guests. Let me give you like 1 minute and 25 seconds to introduce who you are and what you are going to contribute to this podcast to make it the best podcast ever.
Yeah, I'm going to steal the thunder first. Okay. So first off, I want to challenge you for the title of Nerd in Chief because I'm pretty nerdy and I've got a good background in that. But anyways, I'm Mark the Liberty and my title is Director of Security Operations at WatchGuard Technologies. But as with anything in security and tech, the reality is a lot of hats. So I run our internal SOC at WatchGuard. Alongside that, I also still lead what we call the WatchGuard Threat Lab, which is our threat research, more of a thought leadership wing of the company. It's the one where we get to do cool stuff and hack things and then talk about it. And then I also help lead our product security team, WatchGuard PCert, running our vulnerability program and our bug bounty program. So I get the cool perspective of both working for a cybersecurity vendor, where our job is to help secure our partners and help you sell security services, while also keeping us secure. So I get to live in the front line and make sure that I both understand exactly what we're trying to sell. At the same time, being able to provide that feedback to our product management team of, hey, here's what the reality is. So my goal over this is to not come at this from the vendor perspective and more from the security operations side of what we're seeing and what we're breathing out there in the field and the different things that you need to adopt in order to help keep your organization safe in this threat landscape we're in.
Cool. Looking forward to that, yeah. Mark. And what about you?
Hello. So my name is Dustin Benner. I work for ClearMedia. My job is not nearly as cool, I think, but so I basically do all things that are security related for ClearMedia, from portfolio management to advising our partners, technical support, making sure that our technical personnel is also trained, and I'm also a WatchGuard certified trainer, so I train our partners on using the WatchGuard Firebox as well. And so I guess what I would like to see today or contribute today is have sort of the disparate puzzle pieces that are security components or security concepts sort of fit together in a way that our partners see, oh, okay, now I have a better understanding of the way they all fit together and be able to present a puzzle that's put together to their customers that makes sense to them. So.
Yeah. Awesome. Makes really sense too, that kind of initiative. Good. Now, we all have a bit of imagination. I'm going to take you on a trip. Imagine that I take you in a helicopter and we take off. Are you in the helicopter already?
Yeah. I'm afraid of heights.
Cool, yeah.
So this is...
He's sweating already.
Exactly.
Cool. Now, we're flying over the security landscape 2023 and you're watching outside. You see a lot of things. Mark, I'm going to start with you. What are 3 things that you see in that landscape today that are very relevant, that are really important for partners to understand, to enable them to transmit this to their customers? What are the 3 key things that you see looking out of the window of our helicopter?
Yeah, if I had to start somewhere, I'm going to start with just the pure security side of things, and that modern threats are evasive, and the level of experience required to launch a sophisticated attack against a small or mid-sized organization, that level of experience has come down dramatically.
Yeah.
Most modern threats are fully commoditized now, meaning that you can go on the underground and just buy or license access to a lot of these tools.
Yeah.
And you don't need to be a pro at writing malware. You can have someone else take care of it for you. So what that means is what used to be attacks that could only target larger organizations and get that return on investment are now making their way down to smaller and mid-sized companies too. So the reality is, we'll probably get into them later, there's some specific types of threats that everyone needs to be on the lookout for. regardless of the company size. There's no such thing as I'm too small to be hacked. Everyone has something of value. If you didn't, you wouldn't be in business. And attackers are going to try and exploit that.
I would suggest that later on in this podcast, we land over in that area and explore some of the details. What is like the second thing that you see out in the landscape?
Biggest thing is we're seeing a still massive cybersecurity skills gap. So we recognize there's that threat for regardless of the size of the company, but it's difficult to impossible to find the expertise needed in order to address that threat internally. Even from like a partner's perspective, someone that is a service provider, it can be very difficult to find the security expertise and offer that to your customers as well too. Cool. And that's where we're seeing a lot of things like managed EDR come into play as well, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Absolutely. I think it's worth landing over there in that area as well. And the third thing that you spot from our helicopter view?
This one's less like, in the weeds and security focused, and more from my perspective from a vendor is that the landscape around security in general is changing. So I'm obviously American, and from our perspective, we're seeing a lot of changes in regulation as well too come through from the vendor perspective. So we're expecting to see a change in how that relationship between consumer to the services, not just security, just software in general, that's going to change in the coming years too.
Yeah.
And why I think this is important is it's driving the discussion about security just in general. So it used to be, from a service provider standpoint, you would have to go like beg your customers, hey, we need multi-factor authentication across your organization to keep you safe. And now we're seeing that kind of shift and seeing organizations come to you as the service providers saying, hey, we need multi-factor authentication or we're not going to get cyber insurance. And that change in just cybersecurity culture and awareness is starting to grow.
That's cool.
And I think we're going to continue seeing that take off as well.
Also quite challenging, I think. Well, let's take some time later on to land in these areas and explore them a bit furthermore. But meanwhile, you have also been looking outside, Dustin. What
I see
are the
those
things
same
that
things.
you noticed?
Yeah, I see those exact same things.
That's awesome.
No, I think something that I've noticed is really, and I guess that's not anything new really, but sort of a misunderstanding of what the complexity involved is in cybersecurity, thinking it's really a matter of, checking some boxes and okay, now we've got this component, we've got that component, we're good to go. So a misunderstanding of the complexity really, a misunderstanding of what's sufficient, or an idea that there is some idea of that's sufficient. We've checked these boxes and that's enough. And also I guess maybe a difficulty, or I don't want to say an unwillingness, but really to convince customers that of their misunderstandings. So that really the idea of, okay, we have these basic components, we've never had any major incident take place, so it's probably fine. But that's really not really the case. And so that challenge, I guess, of bringing getting the customer to understand the complexity and what's required to face today's challenges is more difficult than ever. But again, I think things like regulation, compliance, things like that are really changing that conversation. Cybersecurity insurance. We have NIST 2 coming up in very soon next year, and these are all very positive things to, I guess. Then the customer doesn't really need to understand necessarily the requirements there, and so you have to comply.
But so in a nutshell, I hear you say that the narrative, the storytelling is changing a lot. The people involved and the maturity or the direction of the questions, who asks what to whom, is changing. So there's a lot going on in that area. Now, while I was flying and I was listening to you, I also saw a lot of vendors on the market, and then I see partners on the other side whose customers have questions like, what am I paying for? And don't I pay too much? And do I really need all of this? So maybe in the end, we can also have a small in-between stop over there as well and explore some tips and tricks that partners can use to clarify and simplify the complexity of the security landscape for their customers. Okay, are we ready for the first landing, Mark?
I am happy to get out of the air, yes.
And while you were talking about that point of the threats, I remember a quote I read on the K4 site, which is hackers, they don't break in, they log in. So Would that be a good starting point to start our explorative journey?
A perfect starting point. And so to elaborate on that,
Yeah.
what you're saying is authentication is our cornerstone of security. So we design all of our systems to keep the bad guys out and let the good guys in. And typically how we differentiate them is with a set of credentials. Hopefully that's a strong set of credentials backed up by multiple factors with MFA. But in general, it's if you've got a set of credentials that are valid, you can log in and potentially bypass a lot of security protections, depending on like how you've set up remote access. Maybe it drops that person directly on the network. And so this is a pretty substantial risk for organizations that don't put thought into how they secure that access and how they secure the identity. And we're also seeing a shift in threats as well too. So it used to be, and it still is, multi-factor authentication is the single best thing you can do to protect against a stolen credential. But even now, that's not enough to protect against every threat that's out there. We're seeing types of attacks called adversary in the middle techniques, where the attacker will insert themselves in between the victim and a service they're trying to access. And long story short, they're able to even circumvent multi-factor authentication protections by using social engineering. And so we see trends now where you still need the technical controls like MFA to protect you, but we need additional focus on social engineering training as well too, to stop our users from becoming that victim when they again become one of our weakest links, as sad as that is to say.
This all makes extremely much sense, but I'm just a very small company. Why would a hacker be interested in compromising my IT infrastructure?
Well, I mean, I think if a small company is hacked, it can be equally catastrophic for that small company as it is for, maybe even more so than for a large company, just because there's less resiliency, there's less wiggle room, I guess, to be resilient in that instance. So really, what's it worth to you? It's not necessarily always worth, or about what the value of your data is on the dark web or whatever. It could be, but it's not necessarily the case. It's what is your business worth to you? Are you ready to, close your books and fire and just declare bankruptcy tomorrow? Or are you going to say, well, okay, maybe they're not asking for 12 million euros, but maybe they're asking for 10,000. Well, can I pay that? And then it's an easy payday for those people. So I think that's an understanding that the customers need to have. It's not necessarily what your data is worth, but what's it worth to you? And it's worth a lot to you. So you'll be willing to pay whatever it takes to get that information back.
And even beyond the data as well, even just the reputation hit from becoming the victim of a cybersecurity incident can drastically harm your business. It's like, let alone, cyber insurance premium increases because now you've made a claim, but the loss of downtime, the loss of revenue while you're recovering. Like, let's say you've got great backup and restoration procedures, but, great could still be 1 to 2 days potentially to get everything back online. And can you withstand that loss of revenue as you're down? And then the reputation hit from your customers now, unfortunately, there's still a stigma from organizations as they get hit, because the reality is everyone who's going to suffer a cybersecurity incident, a breach at some point, it's going to happen.
It's like they say of motorcyclists, they say like there's those who have already fallen and those who still have to fall.
Exactly.
So there's companies who have been attacked and those who still need to be.
Exactly how it is in cybersecurity too. And so you need to set yourself up where you're in a spot where you can recover well and recover quickly from that. But even that is not going to be instantaneous. And then making sure that you are resilient enough to withstand that is key.
Yeah. I think what is also important is the fact that, and you mentioned the dark web and the sources where you can get access to all kinds of malicious code. There's a lot of automation going on there as well. It's not that one individual is looking for your company. It's just like routines that scan the World Wide Web for vulnerabilities, and when they find one, they exploit it.
Yeah, it's fishing with a wide net. It's not really looking for you specifically, but it really is just casting a wide net and seeing what kind of what am I getting here, and then moving forward with that. And of course, there's maybe some prioritizing. Okay, we've got a big company here, but other than that, it's really just just look at a firewall. For 5 minutes, and you'll see all of the constant attempts to scan, to break in, to do whatever. Your screen is filled with red constantly because there are constantly probes going on to see, well, where is there a little hole, a little doorway that I can walk through here?
I think that's a great point, because they're not necessarily specifically targeting you as a business. There's tools out there like Shodan and Census are two big ones that are legitimate tools. that are basically like a Google search engine for exposed services on the internet. And the first thing that a bad guy, a threat actor, is going to do when they see, a new vulnerability in Microsoft Exchange server is they're going to use one of these tools and find every single instance, every IP address that has that service running on the internet and just try and pop them all at once. Doesn't matter how big or small you are, you'll get hit with that blast wave when something pops out. So a lot of this also boils down to reducing your attack surface too, making sure that you've got strong defenses in place so that when like these vulnerabilities pop up, you aren't one of those easily hit ones.
Yeah. It reminds me of a story I heard from a printer manufacturer who, and since you mentioned Shodan, and they have like these exposed printers, but multifunctional printers with hard disks on it, with login information on it, with default passwords. I don't have to tell you what happens later once you get access in the network. Yep. But these are things a lot of people are not really aware of. Do you agree with that? Like the whole Internet of Things, the whole array of connected devices and threats?
I want to say tip number 1 for people listening, don't put your printer on the internet. That's probably a poor decision.
Yeah, I mean, I think at a certain point, people need to understand that they contribute to the cybersecurity of a company, whether they want to or not. That too long, they have thought, that's IT's job. I should be able to click and do whatever. Nothing should happen because, IT should have taken the necessary steps to protect us. But sort of an analogy I use is when you leave your house in the morning, you close the door, you close the windows, you lock it. You don't just leave it all open for ease of access and say, that's the police's job to make sure no one breaks into my house. You're not going to do that. You contribute to the security of your home by doing those things. And so it's equally when you are working with, the digital real estate and data of your company, you also have some responsibility to contribute to that and understand how to use your identity, your access in a responsible way. If you see something, say something, report the phishing that you've received, things like that. And so, user awareness training, security awareness training is really an important part of this whole thing. It's really a holistic approach. Security really requires a holistic approach.
And that was another good point of, like, part of this is also from that IT and security professionals perspective too, of making sure that you're building that culture internally so that your users are comfortable coming to you. Like, I don't want to lead with the stick. I want to lead with the carrot, because when one of my users falls for a phish and they realize they've made a mistake, I don't want them afraid to go report it to me. I want them to be my first line of defense there, the scout, and be like, oh, I think I fell for something. Let's let security know. In our perspective, it's not to go and then name and shame them. It's to take the information and work and mitigate whatever the potential damages could be from that one. And a lot of that is just building that culture so that they're not afraid to come to you.
Is that something a ClearMedia partner could build a business model around, like put that in the security service, for instance, and say, like, we also include awareness training? And what do you provide with regard to that's
right? Yeah,
initiative?
there are platforms out there that offer security awareness training, that offer phishing simulations from Microsoft, Fished as just a couple of options. But partners can also custom tailor their own training to their customers from what they've seen. So it's something that is really indispensable nowadays. And sort of the automated platforms are really the way to go in the future, because it's just, certainly if you've got a lot of customers, a lot of small customers, you can't be making all of these trips to it's just labor intensive. So you really want to find something that's automated that's going to be effective and keep things on a regular basis so it stays front of mind. Because if you've done your cybersecurity training once a year, how many people were gone during that time? How many people were absent, sick, missed it on vacation? And they still need that information. So it's better to have something that's automated every couple of weeks, every month, so that they're reminded of this. Oh yeah, cybersecurity is a thing that I need to be aware of.
And with phishing, it's all about teaching the end users to be skeptical about everything they see. You want them to be suspicious and not just trust something at face value. Like, I love it personally. I can tell at WatchGuard, I run our program internally, and I can tell it's working because now anytime like HR sends out something that just looks a little bit suspicious, we get dozens or hundreds of reports to us saying, hey, was this you guys or was this HR? And it's, I love that because it means that they're considering it. And if it looks a little bit sketchy on face value, that's great that they're not just immediately going with whatever the request is.
So you're definitely also drinking your own champagne, which is what
Exactly,
partners better do as well.
And it's a good way to validate that your program is working too. When you've started building that culture and your end users work with the IT or security team, whether it be in-house or whoever you're working with, as like a cohesive team to try and respond to these threats that we're seeing.
Awesome. Cool. Now, let's maybe get back into the helicopter and fly the second stop. I'm going to be honest with you. While you were spotting the second stop, I was like scanning the horizon for all of the other players. So where are we going to land now for the second landing?
What are you feeling today, Dustin?
Oh, what was it? Something you talked about? Identity?
Yeah, identity sounds great. Let's go take a look at that.
Cool.
It's a short hop away too. I can deal with that one.
Great. So, and it also fits into you no longer break in, you log in.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, maybe it was EDR, managed EDR?
Let's go.
Yeah, we were talking about EDR as well.
Yeah, that was something.
Yeah.
Or skills gap. There was something
I think
else
these
we
are
talked
really
about.
two very interesting.
Yeah, really. Yeah, they're related. Yeah. So I mean,
if we can take one trip and nail both of those, that sounds great for me.
Perfect. The floor is yours. What about let's start with the skills gap. In the pre-talk, we also had some exchange, some interesting ideas. So why is that a worry, and what can you do to bridge that gap?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's really widely known. I mean, any of our partners all of our partners have been confronted with the fact that it's very difficult to find people that are that have the necessary skills for to run a security program, to react effectively to security incidents. It's just really difficult to do that. And if we look at something, offering a 24/7 security service, for example, to customers, you can't even find them to just have normal working hours, let alone have staff a full team to provide a 24/7 service. And then again, security skills, it's such a broad spectrum. There are so many different types of security skills. How are you going to cover all of these different aspects of security in a small company? It really is almost an impossible task for smaller companies servicing other smaller companies. So really what we have to do is rely on vendors, trusted advisors to provide that service for us, or some support in some way.
Yeah.
The typical benchmark for like building your own security operations center is around like $1 million a year. Because to run 24/7, you need enough headcount to cover that as well too. Like you said, the expertise. Yes, you need tier 1 analysts to just take care of the quick triage, tier 2 to do more in-depth investigations, tier 3 to do incident response. You probably want someone familiar with like data forensics and investigations in there. You probably want someone familiar with malware analysis or file analysis. All of this really adds up where it's expensive if you can find them. And even once you do find them, it's extremely difficult to retain that talent too. Because you get those tier 1 analysts that come in, maybe this is their first job out of college. Soon as you put in the time, effort to train them for like a year, they're going to move on to somewhere else as now a tier 2 analyst elsewhere. And it becomes really difficult and almost insurmountable to launch this program yourself, which is where working with a vendor that does managed EDR can help out a lot in that regard.
And today on the market, not only in security, but we hear a lot about artificial intelligence. Thanks to ChatGPT and OpenAI, has been democratized. So a lot of people gain a lot of time automating certain things. What about the role of AI in security? How do you see the future of that? And also with regard to the skills gap and automation?
Man, how much time do we have?
Oh,
because I could
time
talk
it
about
takes.
this forever. If you had asked me 3 years ago what I thought about AI, and I would have corrected you and said, "Oh, you mean machine learning?" I was not super convinced. We were using machine learning models to proactively identify like specific types of threats. Works extremely well. But this is like pre-Chat GPT when just the roof gets blown off of it. Now, if you ask me, and we're seeing all these applications of like large language models being used just for ease of use and helping people get started on like a topic maybe they don't understand. Like I think AI and machine learning is the future in cybersecurity. One of the areas that I think we can see a great application for it is like you're a tech and you understand you're probably good at your job because you're good at Googling things, right?
Google foo. Yeah.
Exactly. But that's a difficult skill to learn in some cases. And you have to know like how to find the answer to the solution you're working for well, what if you've got this model that's been trained up on all of the product documentation for all of the services you offer? You can just be like, hey, security GPT, how do I do this? Or how do I respond to that? And it may not give you like the perfect step-by-step for everything, but it'll get you started on where to go. It kind of replaces, I don't know, my workflow of, Google site:/stackexchange.com and put in my question there. I think that's going to be a great use. We'll continue to see AI and machine learning models used in just technical security controls as well too. So WatchGuard, we just acquired a company called Cyglass just about a week ago. And as part of that, we're able to bring in AI and machine learning into network detection and response as well too. Where instead of signature-based detections, we now have proactive anomaly-based detections within a network. These are the applications for AI and machine learning that make my job easier, means less for me to go in and investigate manually. We can help bring down false positives and limit some of the noise as well too, to make your security program run smoother as well. Mm-hmm. Like this is the future that I'm now fully on board, the AI machine learning train. Way different than if you'd asked my jaded and somewhat cynical answer 3 years ago.
Yeah. And so it's definitely something partners should follow closely as well.
Yeah.
Well, I think the vendors are really going to lead that movement in that direction, because it's something that's complementary to. It's definitely not going to replace the skills shortage or anything like that. It's just going to make response and more effective. Make cut down on false positives, that noise. Hopefully, lower that noise floor. But at the same time, I think it's also something that is, also works against us. Adversaries are also using this to, lower that threshold of knowledge to launch an attack, just to make it even easier for them to attack, anybody really with a low skill level. And so it's certainly something that's that works in both directions.
So I focused on the defender side, but on the adversary side, it was a few months ago we saw something called Worm GPT pop up on underground forums. Mm-hmm. And it sounds, big and spooky, but the reality is it's a large language model similar to ChatGPT that's been trained up on, probably not as great of a data set as OpenAI has access to, but still very strong and capable model, but without any of the guardrails that OpenAI or Google or Microsoft would put in place to protect it from being used for abuse, which means a adversary can go on and license out or rent access to this and then potentially write convincing spear phishing messages at scale. Mm-hmm. And it means you don't need to put in the hours as an attacker to carefully craft it for each of your would-be victims. You say, hey, Worm GPT, here's who I want to target, spit out phishing messages. Oh, and by the way, just go ahead and send them for me as well too. Yeah. That's the future that we're going towards from a attacker perspective. And we need to make sure we're capable of detecting and blocking that from the defender side as well.
Yeah. Which is, again, another good reason for even the smallest of companies to not think, I'm never going to be touched because I don't exist in the eyes of the hackers. Mm.
Yeah, the barrier is getting lower and lower every day. And as that barrier of entry for launching sophisticated attacks comes down, the potential number of victims goes up.
Yeah.
And the amount of effort it takes is also, reaching a zero level. It's you should log on to some AI thing, some AI platform. Make me a phishing mail like this, and you've got it. And just give your list of. It's just way too easy to do nowadays. So it's when you take that into account, that the ease of attack, then we really see the likelihood of attack also increasing. So that likelihood. Threat gives us risk, so our risk is increasing.
Yeah. So anticipating is one thing, detecting is one thing, and responding in the quickest of ways and recovering is the third thing. What are the things that we can expect in the field of detection response systems, EDR, XDR?
It's really, so our vision is all about bringing in all the tools together so that you can quickly respond to threats as they pop up. We're seeing this a lot with vendor consolidation, where all of your security services managed through a single pane of glass can help you quickly respond. And so our perspective, or at least my perspective, is that our future is going to be more of that consolidation to make it easier to manage, easier to respond. And that will help bring down the response time as attackers can speed up their attack time as well, too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, certainly that consolidation really is really an important part for partners who have a large number of customers to service, because if they've got, a myriad of tools that they're using, all of these different platforms, they've got to keep in mind all of the, they've got to manage all of those platforms for one. But the second thing is, whenever there's some alert, some incident, then they've got to log into all of these other platforms to see, is there some sort of secondary evidence, some secondary indicators anywhere else that we're seeing, or is it, whereas if you've got it in a single pane of glass, that has some risks, of course, as well, but the added value really outweighs the risk, certainly in our market segment, by far.
Yeah.
So.
And if we say consolidation, we also refer to multiple vendors. And then my question from the very beginning, I'm a small business owner. What do I pay for? And how can I, as an IT partner, tell a customer that all of the brands that they actually use are, extra layers of protection? What would be your advice to typical SMB partner? Because I know in the States, SMB is like 500 and more. Over here, we talk about companies with maybe 25 up to 50, maybe 100 users on a tight budget, hardworking, and always asking, where's the money going?
You had the key word in there is layers. Yeah. And so the best strategy for cyber defense is a layered approach to security. So making sure you're not relying on a single tool or a single service, because the reality is there's no such thing as unhackable. There's no such thing as fully perfect security services. So you need those additional layers to catch threats that may make it through one or the other. I think on the flip side as well, the reality is some companies are great at some things. Some companies are great at others. Some companies only provide certain services. Like as an example, WatchGuard, we don't provide phones. And so you'll always need that sort of ecosystem play. And that ecosystem is a big piece of it too. Like how do they interact with each other? What are your potential integrations to help that ease of management, even with technically different systems as well? And we're seeing a lot of that growth, at least from my perspective as well, where services from one organization play well with ones from others to help give you better together than individually.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly guides the choices of a portfolio for small partners as well. Determining, what are the integrations possible? How much can I consolidate? Of course, you're not going to be able to consolidate everything. It's just not possible. But that's certainly something that is at front of mind for our partners. That consolidation and integrations. WatchGuard has a great, very extensive list of integrations that we've used quite often for. Like integrations with SIM platforms like Rapid7, for example, or Sentinel, things like that. So it's always good to have an idea of those things that are available.
And from the end user's perspective, you don't necessarily need to focus on the individual ingredients that are going into it. The reality is you just need a coherent strategy to address your cyber risk and work with service providers to help provide that slate of different services that ends with lowered risk for you.
Yeah. It makes me think of a sort of an acronym I often use in sales and communication training sessions. SCORE, it is, SCORE, where the R is the resources, is the multitude of security solutions that you have that you need to combine somewhere to achieve the O, which is the outcome, to generate a certain effect and experience for the user, ease of mind or whatever, security based on a certain situation, referred to in sales as pain points and risks and so on and so forth. So it's a matter of balancing and as an IT partner, I think talking the language of the customer, that is the outcome and the effect. How will they know that they feel secure and what is important to them? Because a lot of things they don't even know, they're not aware of, and then gradually build in the narrative, in the story, adding elements that make sense to all of them. And then in the end, as you say, they don't need to know what they buy, as long as it's like if you would serve them a plate, they don't need to know all the ingredients, as long as the plate tastes very rich and good.
I think we see a lot of end user companies quickly think that they've done enough, that we have this now and that's enough. That's something I talked about earlier. What is sufficient, or misunderstanding what the complexity, and thinking, okay, now we have our antivirus, that's fine, but really not understanding that there is that there is a much greater complexity of it, that there is a much greater complexity, and that they need to follow their trusted advisors when they're considering what how far they need to go. Of course, the medicine shouldn't be worse than the cure, of course, but I feel like right now there's still too much of a movement of quickly saying, we've never had any major issue, so it's fine. It's almost like saying we're not going to take any insurance for our house, any fire insurance, because we've never had a fire at our house before. Well, you don't want to wait until your house burns down to then say, oh, maybe we should get some fire insurance. So,
and I think you hit it on it earlier as well with the check boxes too, where we've got a benefit right now in our industry where cyber insurance is starting to get very serious about cybersecurity. They realize that 3 straight years of just paying out ransomware extortions wasn't really making them a whole lot of money. So now in order to even get cyber insurance, let alone cyber insurance that's affordable, there is a mandatory set of requirements, and those requirements are actually becoming more robust. It used to be, say, you need multi-factor authentication. And it was literally do you have multi-factor authentication checkbox? And you say, yes, I do. They didn't ask, across how much have you deployed it? Is it your entire user base, or is it just your privileged users? Or, man, I heard this one example this year recently. Someone had their customer deployed on a single account, and they said, yes, we've got multi-factor authentication on that one account. I'd love to see what happens when an incident occurs and their insurance provider finds out that that's how they answered that checkbox. But that's where we were coming into this year, and now going forward, we were actually seeing insurance providers become very thorough in how they even validate that as well too, which means that it's not just going to be that checkbox. It's going to be how do you have it adopted? And that's important because from our perspective, it at least drives the conversation where it used to be, cybersecurity was seen as the cost center for the organization. It's something I'm paying and I'm not getting revenue out of it. Yep. But now we're realizing that cybersecurity is meant to help enable your business to stay in business in this landscape where you are under attack. And I think cyber insurance is a piece of it, helping drive that. And also just culture in general has started to grow. My mom is asking about cybersecurity, and that's my metric for how well we're doing as an industry. When her and my grandmother are starting to question about things like social engineering. It's great. It makes my job easier. I'm sure it makes your job a little bit easier too.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, it's everyone uses these digital tools nowadays. It's such an integral part of the way that we work that the idea that we've quickly secured it enough, really is kind of crazy. You really need to. You can't. It's almost difficult to overvalue these tools, because if we don't have them available to us, then it's really everything grinds to a halt very quickly. Yeah. So I think that the customers really need to understand that I keep returning to that point of what's enough. And of course you have to find some way to implement these things without too much user friction, where there's some productivity is also important. But I really think that they really need to understand that these are critical tools for us. This continuity of our company is really critical, and how fragile it is nowadays if we don't really think about it in a holistic manner. Yeah.
You mentioned cyber insurances as one motivator to get everything checked. There's also NIS2 coming up. How will that affect if there would be 2 things you say this will impact the typical SMB customer? What are you thinking of?
Well, NIS2 really depends on the sector that you're in and also the size of your company. So for a lot of small companies don't have many requirements in terms of, for compliance. But it really is important to know whether or not you do that you are bound to some requirements for compliance. But really what I think of NIS2 is that provides such good guidelines that are just great for everyone to apply. I mean, start with the small, set of guidelines, start working on these things. Do I have an inventory of my assets? Do I have any type of incident response plan? Do people know what to do when something happens? Who to call? Who's responsible for what? And then work your way up from there. It's really such a good roadmap that's available to everyone. Just start working on these things. Start chipping away at this at all of these requirements. It could be easy to look at it and see and feel overwhelmed. That's why I say start with the small. Get these basics out of the way. These are all best practices that everyone really should be implementing. So even if you're not required by law to follow these, I mean, it's really a good idea to. I mean, these are really great suggestions.
A good key takeaway. Don't wait for something that forces you to do it. Anticipate.
And we're seeing this in the States as well, too. Yeah. So in the U.S., we've got a federal organization called the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency, or CISA. You probably see a lot of co-branded releases from them and our international partners as well about specific threat actors. But just based off the name, they are specifically for securing federal government and civilian agencies and critical infrastructure. But the reality is all of the guidance that they put out is applicable to anyone. For example, they came out with their cyber performance goals, I think it was around last year now, which it's a way for an organization to gauge where you're at along your cybersecurity maturity with specific, actionable, like bulleted list of here's what you should be doing and how to do it. And I think it does a great job between like the CISA cyber performance goals and NIST2 of kind of slowly bridging that gap from the framework of here's the 10,000 foot level of what you need to do down to what you can actually take to your board or your business or your CEO and say, here's why we need to be doing this and some of the things we can accomplish quickly for good return on investment. And I think across the world, we're finally starting to see this with government agencies, regulatory bodies, not just come out with, you know, the high level, what you need to do, but actually good guidance on how to get there too. And I love that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You want to add something, Dustin?
Well, it's so late, really, that we got to this stage. This should have happened so many years ago. It would have saved so many people a lot of headache. That if this clear guidance would have come out a long time ago, because it really, you know, cybersecurity has so many aspects, so many domains to focus on, and a lot of times we just don't think about those things. Like, oh yeah, there's also this and there's also that. And when you have these clear roadmaps to work on, you see it all put out in front of you, like, okay, and it's not all sequential. I can work on this, and in the meantime, I can work on this and that, and everything is, even if it's not perfect, every little thing that I do is strengthening my company in the meantime. And so, yeah, I just think it's great that it's there, and I hope that, you know, that partners really and their customers really pay attention to it and you know, really get to work on it.
And it's important to remember that there's no such thing as perfection in cybersecurity. You're never going to reach a point where you say, all right, I'm done. Like the reality is it's all about continuous improvement. And that means you got to start somewhere. So using things like NIST2 to be able to at least find out what your benchmark is, where you're at right now, and then find those low-hanging fruit that can give some good return on investment is key. And you just iterate and improve where you can and get stronger and more mature and more resilient over time. That's what you need to focus on. Don't focus on trying to get to the end destination. Yeah. Focus on the journey there.
The journey, and step by step move on with. Now, so for partners, the good news is that everything becomes much more materialized. There are much more guidance. There is Apogee by WatchGuard every year as a source of information. What other advice would you give partners to stay up to date with regard to the topics that we have just discussed?
For me, it's always stay plugged into news sources. Cybersecurity is a changing landscape, and so understanding what the threat landscape is key to how to defend yourself. Like, man, it's just been in the last year we've seen this explosion of AI and machine learning really start to accelerate some sophisticated attacks. And if you're not plugged into understanding how this might affect you and your customers and your end users, you're going to fall behind. So staying up to date on what the latest trends are, staying up to date with what your latest services you can deploy are, is going to be massively important.
I just want to say real quick, like if you use a certain platforms, say for example, you know, Microsoft or VMware or something like that, subscribing to their security advisories is already a really good idea. So you're aware when these things are, you know, when there are security advisories and what action you need to take to remediate, you know, or whatever it is their recommendations are. I think is a really good place to start. And if you have some people in your organization who are interested in security, who maybe want to evolve in that direction, you know, have some sort of specialization. I mean, I don't know which sources you read, but, you know, something that I look at almost every day is Bleeping Computer, bleepingcomputer.com. They have a you know, security news. You know, just to sort of as a starting point to sort of dive deeper into the topics that are brought up, I think it's a really good one. You know, you can skim through it and quickly see, you know, what things are relevant to you and what are not. You know, that's, you know, so I think that things like that are, you know, encouraging people to you know, like you say, stay plugged in. You know, sources like that are really good.
I like the expression encouraging people to stay plugged in. So as a partner, you also need to create space for your staff members to take time to read so that they don't have to do it like at night.
Yeah, exactly.
But they can
yeah.
do it like when it suits them and stay tuned as such. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Yep.
Gentlemen, I think we're almost out of gasoline with this flight. Yes, but we'll in for a safe landing. Okay. So while going back to the ground base, if there is one key takeaway you would like to share with the ClearMedia partners in the field of security, like this one thing you would like to share with them?
I went first last time. You want to?
Okay.
So I don't have to steal your
Yeah, well,
thunder?
I think I'm going to sound like a broken record, because I just keep returning to the same thing, but it's just something that really just sticks in my mind, and that is, sort of the idea of what is sufficient and understanding that it doesn't always have to cost a lot of money to be an improvement in cybersecurity. It's not always about buying another component. Those, having the tools there is important, but it's not only that. It's also making sure you have processes and procedures and that your people understand what what to do when the crap hits the fan. Let's say it in a nice way. And also, having policy, having, all of these things that really contribute to a security culture in your company. I just think it's really important, and I think our partners can really contribute to the cybersecurity of their customers by guiding them in that and helping them improve. Yeah.
Perfect. So move from the pure interaction or transaction of licenses and solutions to an ongoing interaction on topics and
an ongoing path towards of improvement of the general cybersecurity. Yeah.
Perfect.
And I'm going to take that and build on it as well and say that what is sufficient is a moving target. And so part of it is just staying in the know of what you need to, what's affecting your company, what's affecting your sector, what's affecting your users, and making sure you've got a strong defense capable of catching that. And a lot of that comes down to just making sure you've got the right tools deployed, the right visibility in place in order to catch some of those more newer and evasive threats, and set yourself up in a spot where you can quickly respond to whatever slips in through the cracks in the walls. Because again, reiterating what we've been saying, there's no such thing as a perfect defense. Every organization will fall off their motorcycle at some point. So make sure that you've got the right padding, the helmet in place. In the States, we have to rely on medical insurance, but the medical insurance to recover from that potential incident, and setting yourself in a spot where you can continue chugging along. You've got strong resiliency in the face of what we're seeing out there.
Cool. Dustin, Mark, thank you so much for your valuable input in this podcast. And you out there listening to us, it has been a pleasure having you on this podcast too as audience. We are really keen on receiving feedback. We have a special email address for that. It's called ClearTalks@clearmedia.be. ClearTalks@clearmedia.be. So give us your feedback if you want to hear a topic, if you want to dig into something. If you want to do things or see us do things in a different way, we'd like to hear from it. And meanwhile, give us a like, share this podcast, and enjoy life and keep your customers secure. Thank you.